The Canadian government has begun reserving blocks of seats on commercial flights out of Lebanon as thousands flee Lebanon as the threat of a full-scale war with Israel becomes more real. Scenes from this week show thousands of people lined up in heavy traffic across the country trying to escape the heaviest Israeli bombardment since 2006. Since Monday, more than 700 people have been killed in Lebanon, including 2 Canadians, husband and wife Hussein and Dad Tabaja. We know that around 45,000 additional Canadians are registered with Global Affairs Canada in Lebanon. Mélanie Joly is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and she joins me now from New York City. Minister Joly, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure.
Before we get into the details of how you're helping Canadians get out, I understand you just spoke with the Lebanese government, the minister, the prime minister, the prime minister. How close do you think we are to the potential of a full-scale war between Israel and Lebanon, based on that conversation?
Well, of course, everybody's very concerned because we've been working a lot, supporting mainly the Americans and the French, who have been negotiating a 21-day ceasefire and trying to have the Israeli government and Hezbollah on board, which has not happened yet, unfortunately. So, of course, we continue to call for an immediate ceasefire because the situation in Lebanon is extremely dire, and that's what the Prime Minister Mikati, the Lebanese Prime Minister, was explaining to me. This is a country which has faced tremendous hardship since also the last evacuation in 2006, David. The port of Beirut, if everyone recalls, went through an explosion. There has been a very severe economic financial crisis, and there is a political crisis, and there is also a humanitarian crisis because more than 2 million Syrian refugees are now in Lebanon. So now, with the tensions at the certain border and the conflict between Hezbollah and Israel, this is a real recipe for an extremely difficult situation, to say the least. And so Canada is a friend to the Lebanese people. We want to make sure that civilians are protected. We need to make sure that innocent people are not targeted. And you were referring to the 2 Canadians that were killed. I spoke to their sons earlier today, and they were killed they were innocent civilians trying to escape the violence in southern Lebanon and trying to get to Beirut, and they were hit by IDF strikes. So,
has Israel expressed any remorse or sense of responsibility to Canada, Minister, on that? I spoke with the Israeli ambassador yesterday. It was unclear to me if they've expressed this to you as Foreign Minister, to the Prime Minister, taking any responsibility or expressed remorse. What can you tell us on that?
So I've been in contact with the Foreign Minister of Israel to that regard, and we haven't received any comments yet. We're not the only country reaching out, and at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is really to support the ceasefire negotiations. But clearly, this is an issue, and clearly, it's not only the 2 Canadians that were killed, but also there are 3 Canadians that are injured, heavily injured, including 2 children. So this becomes an issue also for Canada in these circumstances. And this is just part of the overall Middle East conflict that we're seeing, and Canada's role is to put pressure on all parties to make sure that at the end of the day the violence stops and that we bring back peace and stability to the Middle East. Well,
there was quite the military strike on a target in Beirut today, going after the leader of Hezbollah. There are reports coming out now of strikes continuing even as we're speaking, and in that backdrop, you're trying to get Canadian citizens out of Lebanon. I believe I might have misspoke. There's 45,000 in the country, about 20,000 I think might be registered with Global Affairs. I'm not sure what the number is at this point, but you're booking seats on commercial flights. How exactly is that going to work? How many, how much, how soon?
So we have around 20,000 Canadians that are registered indeed with Global Affairs Canada. We believe that this number is higher in across Lebanon, also because we consider that not only Canadians have a right to come back, of course, but we we accept Canadians and Canadian permanent residents and their spouses and their children. So you can see why the number is higher. But also what we're doing right now is, first and foremost, we're saying to Canadians in Lebanon, please leave now. I can't be more direct than this. And also, if you're Canadian, don't go to Lebanon. Now, the best way to leave Lebanon, for anybody that knows well Lebanon, it's through the Beirut airport. And right now, there's still commercial options available. And so that's why, based on the fact that we want to offer options to Canadians, we've been able to secure seats on commercial flights. And Canadians just have to register with Global Affairs Canada online, and we can help them have access to commercial seats on commercial flights. And not only that, we've been able to secure priority for Canadians on these flights. So that's how we're doing it. Of course, we have eventually an evacuation plan, but should there be an evacuation, David, which we really hope that won't happen, but should that be the case, it would be by sea.
Right.
And so we know that's more complicated for the reasons I've given you, which is basically the explosion of the port a couple of years ago. So that's why I'm pleading to Canadians in Lebanon, please take this new option we're offering, which is basically through commercial means. And we're offering also loans, so financial assistance for those who would have difficulties paying the ticket.
Right, so you're facilitating their space on the plane, but ultimately they would be responsible for paying their own way, either through a financing option through the government or just buying the ticket directly. Similar to what we saw with Israel it's in the weeks after October the 7th attacks. It's sort of a replay of that.
Well, so when there is an evacuation, what we do is we bring people to safety. So in this context, it would be through sea, through Cyprus.
Right.
That's what we've been working on. Back in May, I decided to go to the region. I went to Lebanon, I went to Cyprus, I went to Greece, I went to Turkey, and I secured agreements with all these countries. I'm in New York right now. I've been also in contact with many of these foreign ministers to make sure that all these countries are still on board. But also we're working with key governments, the Australians, the Americans, and also the French governments to make sure that also we adapt our evacuation plans together, because what we learned from the evacuation in 2006 is that we can't compete for spaces at the port. We need to be organized all together.
Okay, so get out while you can by air while the airport is still functioning. The emergency option is port, but that's less reliable and more fraught with risk. A question, I wanted to just go back to, you said that you spoke with the family, the Tabaja family, about the deaths of Hussein and Daud in this strike. What did you tell them about what Canada is prepared to do in regards to what Israel has seemingly done here? What action are you prepared to take in response to the IDF killing of these Canadians?
David, these are always difficult conversations. These are the most difficult conversations I've had in my life. And at this point, I've had too many of these conversations because of the Middle East conflict. And we're now also organizing potentially a 6th evacuation of Canadians over the past 3 years. So, of course, I offered my condolences. Of course, they wanted to make sure that it was clear what had happened, and to make sure that they would be able to have access to information. And that's why I also, based on their demand, that I tweeted clearly what had happened, which was basically Israeli strikes killing their parents. And, you know, I've had tough conversations, difficult conversations with families of hostages also, right. or Canadians that died on October 7th. So my job is to make sure that I offer empathy, that I'm able to help them go through this extremely difficult time that is a trauma. And at the same time that I do everything to make sure that they get accountability. And sometimes it's very difficult, but that's my job as Foreign Minister.
Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly, thank you for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Rescue workers are still digging through the rubble of buildings leveled by Israeli strikes. They pulled these 2 children out alive. But as the conflict continues to escalate, Lebanon's health ministry says over 90 people were killed in just the last day. So why does Israel continue to defy its closest allies' calls for a ceasefire? And how far has that gotten it to actually defeating Hezbollah? Randa is a senior fellow and director of the Conflict Resolution and Track 2 Dialogues program at the Middle East Institute. John Allen is a senior fellow at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy and a former Canadian ambassador to Israel. It's good to see you both again. Thank you for being here.
Good to be with you.
Randa, I'd like to start with what we know and what we don't know about what is happening right now in Beirut. Spokesperson for Hezbollah says that their leader, Hassan Nasrallah, is fine. There are sources connected to Israel that suggest he was definitely in that bunker and they don't believe he could have survived. What are the implications, one way or the other, if Hassan Nasrallah survives or was killed in this?
Yeah, we don't have yet an official statement from the media office of Hezbollah about the fate of Hassan Nasrallah. I think the implications are going to be tremendous. I mean, this is a person who has been Secretary General of Hezbollah for the last 32 years, has shaped the organization around him, you know, his gravitas. He was deeply involved in the military affairs. His deputy, if he were to die, his deputy, Naim Qasim, was never involved in the military affairs. He's more the political face of the party. And so it's going to be a humongous loss to Hezbollah. In my opinion, it's akin to the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the IRGC Quds Force, in 2020. Nasrallah and Hezbollah are the anchors of the Iran-led resistance network, axis of resistance, and the stability of Hezbollah is not only important, you know, is important for the stability for this network, but also it's important for Iran's regional policies, for Iran forward defense strategy to prevent attacks on its territory.
So John, Israel's military says it's hit a lot of Hezbollah weapons, killed a number of its members of its senior leadership, and we're still awaiting to find out what exactly happened to Mr. Nasrallah. There is a bulletin moving across our wires now saying communication lost with Hezbollah's senior leadership, source close to Hezbollah. If they succeed in getting Hassan Nasrallah, do things escalate after that? Do they de-escalate after that? I mean, what does this do to the state of play, the strike into Beirut?
Very hard to know at this point, David. You know, Hezbollah, you could suggest, has been restrained up to now. It could be not just an intentional restraint, but they've been hit so hard, beginning with a number of their leaders assassinated, and then the walkie-talkie and pager event, and then more assassinations, and now these targeted bombings, the last one not quite so targeted. So they have been hurt badly. Are they capable now of unleashing their 150,000 rockets? And does Iran want them to unleash those rockets? I think we have to remember that the reason that Hezbollah exists is not as a political party in Lebanon or not as a military force in Lebanon, but it's there as a deterrent for Iran, just in case Israel decides to attack Iran. And it's not clear what Iran wants Hezbollah to do, and it's not clear what Hezbollah is capable of doing right now. We do know that they've got a large stockpile of very dangerous weapons that, if unleashed, could challenge Israel's defenses and could reach all parts of the country.
Israel has just said, Randa, that it will not allow the civilian airport in Beirut to be used for military purposes, which is an ominous statement considering Canada is trying to get its, and other countries trying to get its citizens out through there. So we don't know what that means for that airport. But also the military says it will strike Hezbollah assets in southern Beirut in the coming hours, and it is urging people to leave. Hezbollah is one thing. Lebanon is a sovereign nation, and this is its capital city. What are the implications of Israel striking into the capital city of a sovereign nation that it's not formally at war with to get the people who run the terrorist organization that occupies inside Lebanon's borders?
Yeah, this is not the first time that Israel would do that. I mean, they've done that in 1982, they've done that in 2006. And, eventually Israel had, two devastating consequences in both cases. And in this case, it's going to be even more devastating for Lebanon, given the economic condition it has been under. And the deaths that have already occurred, more than 700 people. In this strike, which targeted 6 residential buildings in a highly densely populated area, I know very well. According to the Israeli defense establishment, they expect the death toll to reach about 300. This is mostly a civilian area. It is where families live, where kids live, where women live. And so, and they are now digging through the rubble, and the use of 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs it's going to be very hard to find bodies. If any. And so if Hassan Nasrallah was in one of these bunkers, I don't know if his body would be found, given the severity of the attack. So what are the implications for Israel? More international outcry over its violation of international norms, more international isolation for Israel, and it's going to lead, to response from Hezbollah using its precision-guided missiles. I think this time, as the Iranian embassy in Beirut has said, this is a game-changing development, right. And I think they are going to resort to use whatever they have.
Well, John, Hezbollah has been firing into Israel, throughout the decades, obviously, but with a greater intensity, really starting on the 8th of October, right after the Hamas terrorist attacks on the citizens of Israel. And that's what this is about. The Israeli ambassador was here yesterday, is what Benjamin Netanyahu says, that they want their citizens who they've had to evacuate from near the Lebanese border to be able to go home safely. So they have defied the calls for a ceasefire from the G7, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar this week. And you just heard what Bibi Netanyahu said at the United Nations. He called it an anti-Israel flat earth society and a swamp of anti-Semitic bile. International outrage, everybody involved in these conflicts seems to be immune from it. What do you think Israel does next?
Well, let me just begin by saying, Hezbollah got involved in this, as you said, post-October 8th. And they've claimed that they're going to keep sending rockets into Israel until there's a ceasefire in Gaza. Hezbollah has brought this on to itself, and it has brought this on, unfortunately, to the Lebanese people. They did it in 2006. There was an agreement then, resolution of the UN Security Council, to keep Hezbollah 18 miles away from the border. They violated it immediately. And Hezbollah essentially holds the Lebanese people hostage on this. And now it's holding the 60 or 70,000 Israelis who have evacuated hostage. Israel seems ready to ignore all international opinion. We've got another situation here like in Gaza, where Bibi says one thing to one group of people, Biden and his national security advisor, and implies he's going to agree to a ceasefire. And then 12 hours later seems to listen to Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, his 2 radical right-wing ministers, and decides not to go with the ceasefire and does this bombing in Beirut. So you can't trust him. And I don't think at this point, you've heard what he said at the UN about the UN. At this point, Israel seems to care less about what the international community thinks and what their best, strongest ally thinks, the United States of America.
So Randa, when the Israeli ambassador to Canada was here yesterday, Ido Moed, he said, look, you need to start putting pressure on Iran, more or less, because that's the puppet master behind the axis of resistance, the financier and the supplier for Hezbollah, for Hamas. Is that the path to getting this to some sort of de-escalation? Because the actions we've seen from Israel and the words from Israel imply they're going to keep going until the other side stops, and nobody but Iran can get them to stop. Is that the play here?
I have to basically mention that today, after the strikes, which basically attacked this residential area, Israeli strike, Hezbollah launched rockets against northern Israel. And so the objective, if the Israeli Prime Minister objective is to return its citizens to the north and is to stop Hezbollah rocket attacks. I don't think this is going to be achieved by basically, again, pulverizing southern suburbs of Beirut or doing a carpet bombing of Lebanon, as they have done in 2006. So again, there is a framework, which is a Security Council Resolution 1701, which, for good or bad, it's the only international agreed upon framework to solve the situation between Israel and Lebanon. Yes, it has been violated, but it's the only one that has been agreed upon. It needs to be upgraded. It needs to be strengthened under Chapter 7, bring more forces, equip more the Lebanese army. But there is a diplomatic pathway to solve this. I agree with John. I don't think the Israeli Prime Minister is interested in diplomacy today. I think he is, especially that his public opinion polls have risen since the attack on Lebanon. And he is seeing the continuation of war as part and parcel of his strategy of political survival. And so whether it is in Gaza or whether it's in Lebanon, we are going to see now Israel engaging in yet another long, bloody quagmire, as was the case when they occupied part of southern Lebanon. So again, if the objective is to achieve, stability and peace in northern Israel, the path that Israel is right now on and may be moving into a ground invasion of southern Lebanon is not going to achieve that objective.
John, do you think they will go as far as that? Just as a final point, I mean, we have seen the warnings coming from the G7 and other countries in that region. President Macron, when he was here yesterday, said he doesn't want Lebanon to become another Gaza. How likely is it, do you think, or how probable is it that Bibi Netanyahu and his government may decide a ground invasion into southern Lebanon is what they need to secure their northern border?
Well, it's hard to know, again, at this point, how far they're prepared to go. They're moving troops into the area. The troops are training to be able to move into southern Lebanon. If Hezbollah were prepared to agree to Resolution 1701 and move north of the Litani River, this would be over tomorrow. You will note that the ceasefire agreement that was being negotiated was not between Hezbollah and Israel, but between the Lebanese government and Israel. Hezbollah hadn't engaged. So will Israel decide that in order to protect its citizens in the north, and remember, there were apparently plans drawn up by Hezbollah to do what Hamas did in the south, i.e. have a raid into Israeli territory and terrorize some of the northern kibbutzim and other settlement areas. So Israel is going to have to decide what it wants to do in order to get its citizens back and push Hezbollah back. Ground invasion will be tough. A lot of lives will be lost on both sides. Both Israel and Lebanon have been there before, and it's not pretty. And let's hope it doesn't happen.
We're 13 days away from October 7th, and we've talked a lot since that attack launched by Hamas on Israel about the possibility of this becoming a widening and escalating conflict, and it seems like just shy of the 1 year mark. We're maybe on the cusp of a whole new phase. I want to thank you for being here throughout all of it, and again today, John Ellen and Randa, thank you so much.
Thanks, David.